Hey, amazing real estate investors, welcome back. This is Jason Hartman, and let's talk about cash on cash return. You know, money talks, doesn't it? Of course it does. Money talks, definitely. It talks very loudly sometimes and quietly at other times. And on the last lesson, we talked about cap rate or capitalization rate. Now, I have to tell you that I like this metric better than cap rate, and I think you'll see why as we go through cash on cash return. So our learning objectives on this lesson are: how do we calculate the cash on cash return of a property, and what factors make this increase and what factors make it decrease? That's always what we need to look at. What's going to make things go up? What's going to make it go down? What's going to make it better? What's going to make it worse? So as we dive into cash on cash return, some of the key factors here: the income or the rent. Now, I say or because it's not always rent, as we talked about in the last lesson. Income can come from many sources, but by and large, when you're a real estate investor, it's all about sometimes our favorite four-letter word, rent, okay? So that's where it comes from, net of vacancy, of course. And the expenses, always important: the cost of managing or maintaining the property. The investment, how much cash did we put into the deal? Now, you're going to start to notice some slight distinctions between cash on cash return, and some people will abbreviate this by saying C on C or COC. You'll see that occasionally. That just means cash on cash. And here we're talking about not the total price we paid for the property, like we are with cap rate, but the amount we invested in the deal. Is that the same thing, you ask, Jason? No, it's not. Well, hopefully it's not, actually. Because, of course, if we finance the property, maybe we're only putting 20% down, just as an example, and the price of the property is 5 times the amount we put down on the property. So here, instead of talking about the overall value of the property or the price, of course, in the last lesson, we made some distinctions there between price and value, we're just talking about the amount invested into the property. Big difference here. So how do we calculate cash on cash return? Well, we're going to add up all the income from the property, subtract all the expenses, and divide by the total amount invested. Again, not the overall price or value, just the amount invested. That's why I like cash on cash so much better than cap rate. I think it's really a much more accurate measure of what's going on in the deal, because I want to use leverage on the deal, right? So again, cap rate, it kind of has a couple of limitations. It's okay to know, but again, it's not as meaningful, in my opinion, as good old cash on cash. So here's how that looks as an equation, right? If you're thinking about school, most people, they don't really think of things in this equation format anymore, because we're just using a calculator. Oh, wait, we're not even using a calculator most of the time. We're using software, and it's not illustrated this way. But, you know, it's sensitive to the level of income your property experiences and the amount of cash you have invested in the deal, okay? And of course, the expenses. So what will increase our cash on cash return? Well, the income drivers, right? If the rents go up, our cash on cash return is going to look better. What about the expense drivers? If we can keep expenses low, keep repair costs down, we can manage the property ourselves maybe rather than having a manager, we can keep the vacancy rates low, we can keep tenant turnover costs to a minimum. Some investors do this by asking for longer leases. And then, you know, what are the investment drivers, right? If we can get more leverage by putting less money down, that's going to increase our cash on cash return. Because remember, this is only a comparison of how much did we put into the deal versus how much we're getting out of the deal. And that's what's going to drive our cash on cash return. Okay, so the takeaway is we can increase our COC, or C on C, cash on cash return, by increasing our performance and decreasing the investment required, or both. The best way to always do this when we look at all of these metrics in our real estate investments is to do both at the same time. Come on, I know you can do two things at once. Heck, I can. I do this on my investments, or at least I try to. And to be a really good investor, we want to work at both ends of the equation, right? We want to drive up the income, improve the performance, and decrease the expenses. Now, you've all heard the old saying, maybe you have, he or she is penny wise and pound foolish. By the way, that's a pretty old saying, okay? Or maybe a more contemporary version is, he or she goes through life stepping on dollars while picking up pennies. One of the things that we've got to guard against as real estate investors is we've got to weigh the present day and weigh that against the long term. So an example of that would be, what if we make really cheap, shoddy repairs to our properties, but that ends up costing us more in the long run? Okay, so keep that always in mind as an investor, as you're thinking and making decisions on your properties and your portfolio. Okay, so how does cash on cash return decline? Well, what if rents go down? That's going to compress your cash flow. What if the expenses go up and you have higher repair costs, management fees, higher vacancy, higher property taxes? In many areas, property taxes change. What about insurance cost? That's not listed on the screen here, but that's another one that can really impact you. What if you have an insurance claim and say you have to argue and fight with the insurance company to get them to pay the claim? There are costs like that you have to be conscious of as an investor. And then lower leverage, that's the biggie, right? Because if we can put less money down, maybe we can put 10% down rather than 20% down. That's going to maximize our leverage, and while it may decrease our cash flow, it actually increases our cash on cash return. So the takeaway here is that we're going to decrease our cash on cash return by lowering net income and increasing the amount required to invest initially, or the ongoing expenses. Okay, so it's really kind of like three elements, right? Income, expenses, but initial investment. When we talked about cap rate, we didn't talk about initial investment. We only talked about overall price or value of the property. That's the big distinction here in looking at these different things. Well, what about the three basic economic scenarios or maladies? Because, on the face of it, we would think none of these are good, but actually, I've learned to love inflation as a real estate investor. You should too. We talk a lot about something on my podcast and at my live seminars that I call inflation-induced debt destruction. Try and say that 10 times fast. Inflation-induced debt destruction. Really, inflation can be such an incredible home run for real estate investors. So in an inflationary environment, we see nominal prices, that nominal means in name only, prices decline and declining purchasing power of the currency. So the price is going up, but the value of our dollar or whatever currency we're talking about, could be the yen or some other currency too, that is declining. So we're getting less purchasing power. And then this drives increases in both rents and property values, usually, most of the time, not always, but generally it does. And then deflation, what does that do? Well, falling nominal prices, remember nominal means in name only, and the contrast with that term nominal is real. Real is what something is really, what's really going on in terms of the power of the currency, the purchasing power of the currency versus the price. This is just the name only, not the real. There's real dollars and nominal dollars. And we're going to talk about that more in the course, okay? These are somewhat heady economic concepts to some people, but they are very important. So don't worry, more on that later. Deflationary times are the best opportunity to buy at bargain prices, but the problem is you never know where the bottom of that deflationary spiral is, right? And with inflation, you never know where the peak is either until you look back. Hindsight is 20/20, but when you're in it, you really can't tell very well. So market prediction is a dangerous bet sometimes. So stagnation, what happens there? Well, that's really when kind of nothing is going on, right? Prices, they kind of just stay flat in terms of property values and rents. And then positive cash flow protects us against stagnation and gives us staying power so we can stay in the game. Real estate is a game of staying power. And there's an old saying, or at least it's my old saying. I don't know if anybody else has said it, but maybe this is, I don't know if I got this somewhere or if I just made it up. But it is, time heals all wounds. And certainly in real estate, that is true. If you can stay in the game long enough, you will usually make out pretty darn well in real estate, okay? So money talks, that's what cash on cash is all about. Your action item is to calculate the cash on cash return for 3 properties under 3 different scenarios. So it's really 9 things that you're doing here. Inflation, deflation, stagnation for 3 different properties. And then your badge action is use the template, enter the market information for 3 properties in the template, and it will do the calculation. You're going to simply take a screenshot of this and you're going to upload it for your badge. That's really easy. So of course, where do you get this? You can just get it in your own neighborhood, but of course, what have we been using throughout the course a lot? Good old Zillow. Good place to look, okay? So we will talk to you on the next lesson.